Robert, it's good to see you after such a long time. I have
Likewise.
certain propositions to suggest to direct the conversation in one way or the other, and that is, France was the first one to wave the white flag, as always. They did to Germany. Now they are doing this. So Macron seems to be more worried about Macron the chocolates or the toffees than the French pride. I mean, unless the French pride lives in there. Should France be ejected from Security Council? Should there be a move on that part? For Europe to, as a whole, UK as a whole, to, there has to be a social upheaval for that kind of a thing. Let's raise the demand for that. Let's throw it out in the social media that for the abject surrender. Do you think that Islam is colonizing the Europe, to use the European tool, they colonize the whole world with their imperial practices? Is Islam colonizing Europe and America too? Because now we are looking at a very valid scenario. You use the word peaceful organic takeover, which is what is happening in America with reference to Texas, their epic cities. You heard in Oklahoma yesterday or day before, where the city council passed the bill despite opposition, with an overwhelming majority, to brand agricultural land as business proposition and approve buildings and structures without approvals, without with the measurements or the approval of the building authorities. Is America being taken over, as you said? Peaceful organic takeover is
Well,
happening.
when I said peaceful organic takeover, I was referring to the historical fiction of the idea that the Islamic world, the
Yeah.
Middle East and North Africa and the rest of it, was converted to Islam by means of people becoming convinced that Islam was true and converting freely and without coercion. That is not
That's exactly the process now of the 21st century. They are, when in Epic City argument happened in the town council, the Pakistani lawyer made a statement: we are building our own cities as per your constitution, which protects our freedom of religion. Look
yes.
at the surreptitious way in which they are doing it. That's the point which I'm trying to drive at. I'm not drawing an equal parallel. What I'm saying is the same peaceful takeover is happening. Look at Minneapolis. Look at Oklahoma. Look at everywhere else. Trump made a pompous statement that we are going to let the whole world unite to fight Islamic terrorism after Bondi attack happened. Nobody is covering, nobody's talking about that. So what's happening in America? We live here,
Well,
Europe.
what you're referring to really is the false distinction that American officials and European officials make between peaceful Muslims and violent Muslims. And it might seem to be a very useful distinction, but it isn't. And I'll explain. Most American policymakers, politicians, law enforcement officials, and intelligence officials, they think you're either a jihadi or you're a moderate if you're a Muslim. And they think if you're a moderate, if you're not a jihadi, then you reject jihad and you believe in peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. Those are false beliefs. Those are false assumptions. You can be a nonviolent jihadi. I wrote a book in 2008 called Stealth Jihad, which is just exactly about this, that the jihad advances in order to establish the hegemony of Sharia, Islamic law. And it can do that by blowing things up and killing people in order to destabilize the existing government, ultimately destroy it, and replace it with a Sharia state. But it can also do that by completely nonviolent means that that take the actions that are allowed by the laws of the country, as the fellow you noted in Texas, who said, we're using your constitution to take over. They are manipulating the weaknesses of the American system in order, or the weaknesses of those who are enforcing the U.S. Constitution, in order to ultimately destroy the U.S. Constitution and establish a Sharia state here. And nobody's paying attention, hardly anyone, and nobody is aware of what's happening, because they are stuck on the distinction between violent Muslims and moderates. And they think the moderates, the non-violent ones, are just great, and we have no reason to be concerned about them. Really, though, if we look at it from the standpoint of the goals of both groups, the jihadis and the people who are working in Texas with Epic City and the people in Dearborn and Minneapolis and so on, they all have the same goal, and that is to establish Sharia. And they're just going about it through different means, and we should be aware of the goal more than the means.
And just to add to that, just 1 minute, Sanjay ji, you saw that Tucker Carlson in his speech at Turning Point made the famous statement that he made, that all Muslims are peaceful. Let's not go join everybody else. Either he was fulfilling the statement of the Qatari minister who said that we have journalists in my pocket in our payroll who advance our cause. Is Tucker fallen into that scenario?
Well, there are widespread rumors, of course, that he's indeed paid off by Qatar. His statements now, they contradict his earlier statements, because years ago you can find video of him warning about Sharia and warning about jihad. And now he doesn't say, he says just the opposite, as you noted. And so something's changed. Something has gotten to him, whether he's had a genuine change of heart or whether it's a matter of being paid or threatened, we don't know. But in any case, he is a classic example now, because he's saying these Muslims that you are upset about are not jihadis, and so you have nothing to worry about in regard to them, which completely ignores the nonviolent imperative to establish Sharia. And that's what has to be recognized on a large scale if America and Europe are going to save themselves.
I just wanted a clarification on what you said, and that is, are the Muslim Brotherhood methods different from the earlier methods, say, of the past centuries?
Yes, there's a big difference in what's happened starting in the 20th century. And this is a result of the loss of Muslim political power. The caliphate was abolished in 1924. And before that, of course, the Ottoman Empire was weak and essentially ineffective for decades. And so the age in which the great Islamic empires, not just the Ottomans, of course, but the Mughals in India and others, those are gone. But the jihad imperative is not gone. And I explain this in my book, The History of Jihad, that there was a shift at the fall of the Ottoman Empire to more stealthy means, that by means of infiltration and influence operations and activities of that kind, the Islamic world would still continue to pursue the jihad against the non-Muslims. And so we see it in India. We see the same thing in Europe and North America, that there are influential Muslim opinion makers, there are influential Muslim politicians, and they are all advocating for measures that, if they all succeeded in being adopted, would be followed by others like them that would ultimately result in a Sharia state. And so the goal is exactly the same as what the Ottomans had and the Mughals and all the jihadis of history. The goal is exactly the same, but the means have radically changed in the absence of there being a great Islamic world power.
So how do you look at this this Bondi Beach bombing? And not exactly the massacre as such, but what happened afterwards? Even today, I believe certain 5 or 6 persons were going to the Bondi Beach again, and they were planning to attack those who were mourning there at the Bondi Beach. And they were somehow found out, and the police rammed their car and saved another massacre, I guess. But people are not condemning them. and the Prime Minister is not attending their funeral.
Well, if I may add, the worst part of the story of the car that was rammed and the Muslims who were arrested, and they were apparently on their way to attack mourners at Bondi Beach, they have already been released. And they have been released because the police explained the circumstances under which they were arrested no longer exist, which is a very strange thing to say, because if they were planning a jihad massacre, they can plan another jihad massacre. It might not be at the same time and place that they had initially planned it, but it's just absolutely ridiculous how the Australian authorities are dealing with this problem. And of course, it's the same way that British authorities and European authorities and North American authorities genuinely are dealing with this problem. It's absolutely stupid, completely ill-informed, willfully ignorant in regard to the jihad threat. Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, even said diversity is our strength in the wake of the attack. And diversity is most certainly not our strength, as has been shown in the Bondi Beach attack itself, and in other indications that, once again, bringing in large numbers of Muslims was not wise, because it did not take into account the jihad ideology and the fact that there would be attacks on the non-Muslims in the country. And consequently, diversity is not our strength by any stretch of the imagination. And for him to just be repeating these tired slogans is ridiculous. There's one other thing, and that is Ahmed al-Ahmed. We have to mention him because he's been the hero of the peace, and rightly so. He tackled Naveed Akram, one of the jihadis, and stopped him from firing, so some lives were saved. Ahmed al-Ahmed, according to many reports, is a Muslim, and he was shot twice as he was tackling this man, and he's been hailed not only as a hero, as he should be, but also as an indication that this has nothing to do with Islam. And Bernie Sanders, for example, the senator in the United States from Vermont, let me get it here. He said that we have to avoid Islamophobia, and he said it on the basis of he made a very interesting statement in this connection, and it was this. He said we must stand together and end anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all hate. And he based this on this. He said this: Ahmed al-Ahmed, a Muslim father of two, risked his life to disarm a murderer who was shooting down Jews celebrating Hanukkah in Sydney. Now, notice that he mentions that Ahmed al-Ahmed's a Muslim, but he doesn't mention that the shooters were Muslim. And what he's trying to say is that you want to see the real Islam, it's Ahmed al-Ahmed who stopped the shooters, not the shooters. But that's exactly backward. In fact, it's the shooters who can point to Quran saying, kill them wherever you find them, and when you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks, and so many other passages. And Ahmed al-Ahmed can't point to Quran to say, stop jihadis from shooting Jews. There's nothing in there like that. And so it's Ahmed al-Ahmed is being used to deflect attention away from the conversation the non-Muslim world has to have, which is about, what are we going to do about Islam? Islam is a danger to all non-Muslims. What are we going to do about it? And Ahmed al-Ahmed is being used to prevent that conversation from being had.
There are two things more in this. One is that reports are coming that this gentleman who got hold of the shooter is being vilified, not just in the Arab world, but in the entire Muslim world.
Yes.
And is being accused of being an infidel or infidel sympathizer. That is one. And the second is that large number of people are coming and saying that, well, Quran doesn't preach terror, or Islam doesn't preach terror.
Indeed. And this is remarkable because it's an indication that Islam does preach terror. That the news went out about Ahmed al-Ahmed on Ramallah News, which is a Palestinian publication, and 75% of the comments were against Ahmed al-Ahmed, and even some of them threatening to kill him. And so you would think the Palestinians probably know their religion real well because their whole society is based on it, and yet they hate Ahmed al-Ahmed in large numbers. And so this is something that the West persists in refusing to understand. And the longer it does that, the more danger it will be in, and the danger is brought upon by itself.
Now, the other
Of
part
course.
also is very important with reference to
Uh, uh,
Bondi.
um, you
Okay.
didn't answer that part about
Yes.
Islam doesn't preach terror.
Well, Islam does preach terror. Islam says, strike terror in the enemies of Allah. It's chapter 8, verse 60. And whenever I quote that, there's also 8:12 and 3:151 that mention terror. And whenever I quote those passages, there are Muslims who come in, say on Twitter or somewhere, and they say, that doesn't mean terror like terrorism, you idiot. That means terror like the fear of God or awe in the presence of God. But the reality is different. If you read chapter 8 of the Quran, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war, it's very clear. Those passages are in the context of battle. Chapter 8, verse 60 follows, for example, chapter 8, verse 41, which says that when you are waging jihad against the infidels and you come back with the spoils of war, you have to give a fifth to the messenger. There's no spiritual struggle. There's no spoils of war in a spiritual struggle. If you pray, there's no spoils of war to give a fifth to the messenger. But if you're fighting battles and winning and getting their property and their women, then you can give a fifth to the messenger. So it's very clear we're talking about hot war against infidels, and it's in that context that the Quran says strike terror. So the Quran does directly teach that Muslims should terrorize non-Muslims, make them afraid. And that's what they try to do all the time. They even do it on a small scale. You know, Islamic apologists in the West, they're always trying to intimidate the people that they speak to. They mock them, they call them names, they claim that they're lying, they claim that they're morally corrupt, they claim that they are inaccurate and stupid. And all of these things are designed to put the non-Muslim speaker on the defensive and be afraid. It's all terror. Terrorism is not just killing people, but it's also terrifying them. And this is the traffic this is what Islam traffics in. Large and small, big and little, it's always terror, all the way through. Muslims are terrified before Allah. Muslim women are terrified before Muslim men. Non-Muslims are terrified in the face of Muslims. It's all terror, straight through.
Okay, Vibhuti.
He's frozen, looks like to me.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Vibhuti Jha, are you there? No, he seems to have logged out. Maybe. Okay, he'll come back. Next point I wanted to ask was about this movie Durandar, of which you carried a review. And hello, yeah, of which you carried a review in your website.
Yes.
You really think that this kind of movie can really change the narrative about Islam, at least among the non-Islamic communities?
Yes, very much so. I think that I was very happy to receive this review and to publish it. This was written by an Indian lady who writes at Jihad Watch fairly regularly, and there are 2 more articles by her there today. And she writes under the name of Ashlyn Davis, and I highly recommend her writings to you and to your audience. But in any case, she writes very compellingly about how the film goes against the prevailing cultural narrative in India. And I found this very interesting because, of course, it's the same cultural narrative in the United States. in the establishment media, in Hollywood. It's the same as in Bollywood. Muslims are always the victims. Muslims are always either the hero or the victim, that they're either doing something wonderful and saving the day, or they are being unjustly victimized by non-Muslims. And this is, unfortunately, the environment. This is what people imbibe nowadays far more than they read websites or books. I write as a vocation. I was always a writer. It's the only thing I know how to do and the only thing I'm interested in doing. And I write a lot of books, but I'm aware that people don't read books nowadays. For the most part, they watch videos, and they are informed by watching videos. And so this is the power that Bollywood has, that they can put out these movies that are extremely tendentious culturally and historically, and giving a false view of Muslims and Islam. And people by the millions think this is the way it is, or that it's the way that they ought to be. And so a movie like this could make a huge difference, because it will open people's eyes to the nature and magnitude of the jihad in Jammu and Kashmir, and the jihad in general, in a way that it has not been done before. And so it's what is that other there was a movie not long ago also. Do you know the one I'm talking about? I never got a chance to see it, but they got quite a lot of
The Kashmir Files or the Bengal Files?
Yeah. And so that these kinds of things could completely change the public discussion of these issues in India and in its environment.